Hello, my name is Rain and welcome to my channel where I discuss Fantasy Formula 1. Today's going to be a bit of a different one. I mean, it's a usual team selection type video, but usually I try to post these on the Friday after free practice to discuss what has happened in free practice and sort of finalize my decision. That's not how it's going to work this week because, well, on Friday, when free practice 1 and 2 is airing, I'm celebrating Midsummer. I'm from Sweden. It's Midsummer Eve, so I'm going to be celebrating with my family. But there's enough things to talk about that I thought it still warranted an entire video, so that's why I'm still making my team selection video right now. There's a couple of things I want to discuss that I couldn't go into detail or couldn't discuss as much as I wanted to in my transfer plans video that I posted last week. So it's going to be an entire video about this. If you want to listen to me yap for 15 minutes, stick around, but there's going to be no free practice discussions because I'm recording this on Wednesday. All of the free practice discussions will of course still happen, but it will happen on the deadline stream. I'm doing another deadline stream on Saturday at 2 p.m, 2 hours before qualifying, 2 hours before the deadline. So, you know, pop into the live stream then. It's right here on YouTube. Pop in then to ask your questions, see the free practice discussions, and of course that's when I will finalize my transfers. This is not what my team looks like. This is what my team looks like, but I'm going to talk about this man, Lando Norris, later on in this video, so stick around if you want to hear about that. Let's get right into it. Before we talk about Lando Norris, the first thing I want to discuss actually has to do with the Spanish Grand Prix itself. So what I've done is that I have popped over to F1 Fantasy Tools, clicked on Race Results up here, and then scroll down, and you can click down on this drop-down menu and select a bunch of different things, and I've selected Race Overtakes. Why? Well, because you can also select this little menu here and look back at the 2022 and 2023 fantasy results. This was still the same regulation, so I think these stats still apply somewhat. You have to take with a grain of salt. You know, you can't really look at McLaren, for example, because in Spain last year, McLaren were the slowest car on the grid. So you can't really look at all stats, but if you know what you're looking for, you can definitely find some interesting stuff here. And looking at race overtakes specifically, you can see that the Spanish Grand Prix down here averaged 5.3 overtakes per driver, which, if you look at the entire line over here, the US had 9.1, Netherlands had 12. I mean, that's crazy, but that was because of the rain and sandboards. But apart from these two outliers, the only ones that were, you know, there were a couple that were on the same level as Spain. You had the 5.7 here, 5.4 here, 5.2 here, and then 5.3 here. What this means is that Spain is actually one of the best tracks on the grid for overtaking. If we're looking at the 2022 version, you know, in 2022 they still had the chicane at the end of the lap, so it's not fully the same, but this year was pretty bad for overtakes overall, and still here Spain was one of the best tracks for overtaking. Well, the conclusion I draw from this is that our C-tier assets that usually get a lot of overtakes and, you know, price increases and good points because of them are going to be very strong in Spain. And because of what I discussed in my transfer plans video about Austria, I think they're going to be strong there as well. I'm making an entire separate video about Austria, the limitless chip, and why the C-tier assets are so powerful in sprint races. That's dropping next week after the Spanish Grand Prix. But for now, just trust me. You know, in a sprint race, Max Verstappen gets sprint qualifying, pole position, that gives him no points. He then wins the sprint, he gets 8 points for that. Meanwhile, you have Kevin Magnussen, who starts from P17, climbs up to P13 in the sprint, that's 4 overtakes, 4 positions gained. Suddenly, Magnussen and Verstappen have the same amount of points. So these C-tier assets that are mixing it up in the midfield, that have the, you know, the ability to get overtakes, are very, very strong in sprint races, and also very, very strong on tracks where overtaking is available, such as Spain. So if we then go back to 2024, you can see that our next 2 races, if this wants to load, is Spain and then Austria. So right now, I am on a single B lineup. If you don't know what that means, I've discussed that in multiple videos so far, but essentially it means that I have a single B-tier driver. A B-tier driver is a driver between 15 and 25 million. A lot of people are on the double B-tier strategy right now, meaning they have a combination of Leclerc-Piastri, Hamilton-Piastri, Hamilton-Leclerc, whatever the combination may be. But by running a single B-tier driver only, you can afford better C-tier assets. You can afford Lance Stroll, you can afford Ocon, Magnussen, Tsunoda. I essentially have, the most expensive C-tier assets. Some of them, are pretty close. I don't think Yuki is technically there at the moment. No, they are. Yeah, they actually are the 4 most expensive C-tier assets, and I still have 4.7 million in the bank for an upgrade. So because of the Spanish Grand Prix being good for overtakes generally, and then we have Austria, where these C-tier assets are very, very powerful, I'm going to personally stick to a single B-tier lineup. I've decided that now. I'm not switching to a double B lineup. I was already not really considering doing that, but I've definitely decided now I'm not switching to a double B lineup. I'm sticking with a single B or single A, I'll get to that in a moment, and relying on Stroll, Magnussen, Ocon, and Tsunoda to do the deed for me in the coming 2 races. When we get to Silverstone, I might look to switch to a double B-tier lineup, especially if Lance Stroll has increased to 15 million by then, which is very, very likely. One more 1 million increase, and he is useless, but I'm expecting 2 0.5 increases from Stroll if he doesn't crash, right? So that is like the plan right now. Stick to the single B tier lineup. If you're on a double B lineup, I wouldn't jump on a single B lineup. I would probably still stick to the double B. But if you're like me and you're on the single B, I think you stay with it. I still think it's very, very important. I should discuss this in my transfer plans video at the end. I still think it's very, very important to save a transfer. Either if you have 3, only use 2. If you're on 2, only use 1 free transfer. So that for the sprint race in Austria, which is very, very important, a very important race to have free transfers available for, that you have options there if you want to switch strategies around. So I'm personally only looking to make 1 transfer still this weekend. The transfer I'm looking to make is very likely to be Lando Norris in. Why? Well, I'm already building budget with my 4 C-tier assets. These are what's going to bring me the budget gains. I'm running a budget lineup with Ferrari and Mercedes, no McLaren, no Red Bull, which is likely to stay the same. Because of this reason, I feel like I can go for the points with my DRS boost, and I think Lando Norris is the best driver for points right now, and I'm gonna explain why. You might be wondering, what about Max Verstappen? Well, if we look at the results here on f1fantasytools.com, since the upgrades came for McLaren this year in Miami, Norris DNF'd in Miami, but then won. If he hadn't DNF'd, he would have had a 50-plus pointer for sure, and beaten Verstappen quite handily. Then in Italy, Verstappen won. Norris got second. Norris outscored him because of the driver of the day. In Monaco, Red Bull and Verstappen were struggling. Norris outscored him. In Canada, the same happened again. Verstappen won. Norris outscored him fantasy-wise. And Norris could have won in Canada if not for that safety car, right? So because of all of this, I feel like Norris is the most likely driver to get a lot of points going forward. I think he's better than Verstappen for multiple reasons, right? Number one, he's way, way cheaper. He is like 5 million less than Verstappen. You can see that above me now. Verstappen is at 30.7, Lando is at 25.8, meaning that with Lando you can afford a team like this with the best C-tier assets, which again I think are going to be very, very strong in the coming 2 races. And number 2, he's also just outscoring Verstappen. What's going against Norris just winning in Spain, right? We think Red Bull are going to be strong, but even if Red Bull wins, Verstappen is usually on pole. He's only going to be around 35 to 40 points. Meanwhile, Norris, if he gets P2, that's driver of the day, he's outscoring Verstappen. And then even if he doesn't get driver of the day, he's at 30 points, and that's not that far away from Verstappen, and hopefully those C-tier assets can make up for that. So I think Norris is just the best option right now when going for points. I think you should have Norris over Verstappen pretty much every time. Verstappen is just not popular enough amongst fan base, and those driver of the day points really, really matter. And especially now that Mercedes have caught up, and there's now properly 4 teams competing for those podium positions, it's looking like Verstappen and Norris are the only 2 guaranteed to be up among there, where, Ferrari can have a bad weekend as they did in Canada. Mercedes, you never know. Their car is so unreliable. Sometimes it works great, sometimes it doesn't work at all. You don't trust Checo because he can end up in the wall at any time. I feel like you just trust Norris and Verstappen right now with the DRS boost, and Norris is just better in every sense. Can Max Verstappen outscore him? Yes, of course. I mean, that of course he can. If Norris gets P3 and something like, I don't know, Sainz or Piastri gets P2, then they are probably taking the driver of the day, right? But again, even then, Norris is probably around 30 points. That's not that far behind a Max Verstappen on 35 points, right? So I think Norris is just better than Max Verstappen. I think Norris is the best option for your single B lineups. If you're running a double B lineup, I think it's quite difficult to afford Lando Norris without having something like a Sargent in your team, and I'm personally not a fan of Sargent at the moment. In a double B lineup, I'm more happy to go for like a Leclerc, Lewis. But being stuck, especially now that our budgets are getting so big, if I have a Lewis Hamilton, I have 6.4 million in the bank. And I don't know what to upgrade here apart from maybe like selling Mercedes as a constructor and getting McLaren in. But even then, I'll leave money in the bank. So all of these B-tier drivers leave a lot of money in the bank, so just affording Lando combined with this very, very budget-focused team feels very powerful because I'm hedging my bets more. I'm betting on the points with Lando. I'm betting on the price increases with the rest of my assets, and it's looking pretty strong. I'm spread out amongst 3 of the 4 teams. As for McLaren, the constructor, the main reason I think you want McLaren at all, like a McLaren asset, is to get the driver of the day points from Lando, and you don't get that with the constructor. So I think Lando is just a perfect pick right now. Another reason that I haven't even talked about yet is that he is not very highly owned compared to the rest of the grid, right? Max Verstappen is owned by 43% of strategists. Charles Leclerc is owned by 35%, Lando Norris by 22%, so half that of Verstappen. So he is quite the differential, meaning that people that are sitting on Leclerc, people that are sitting on Sainz, who's also on 21%, by the way, on any of the McLaren users, you're going to gain a lot of points on them, on Lando Norris, and I think unless it's looking like Ferrari are going to be killer this weekend, sort of like their performance in free practice at Monaco, I think my switch this weekend is just Leclerc to Lando Norris. I think it's the easiest switch. It leaves 3 transfers for Austria, and the rest of my team is looking very, very powerful. Again, if it's looking like Ferrari are going to completely demolish everyone in Spain, I probably don't want to sell Leclerc. Then I can just make an Ocon to Hülkenberg or some switch similar to that. But right now, 2 days before free practice, Lando Norris looks like the man for me. But I'm not going to make the transfer yet. I'm going to wait, as you should always do. I'm making the transfer live on my deadline stream. Don't miss it. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The deadline stream at 2 p.m. on Saturday. I will be finalizing my transfer, discuss all free practice stuff, and taking the questions from you regarding your teams. So if you liked this video, if you liked me yapping, subscribe, like the video, and comment down below some questions about your team. I'll look to answer them today and tomorrow. But obviously I'm celebrating Midsummer on Friday, so I will not be available then. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.